Лаборатория за слава FameLab вече съществува от 6 години в България. Имаме прекрасни примери за промяна както на нагласите на самите учени, така и на нагласите на пиар средите и на медиите, но и на публиките. Много са примерите, които мога да дам. Един от тях идва от устата на един ръководител на научен институт в Българската академия на науките, който участва в жури на Лаборатория за слава, който сподели в едно изследване, че в началото е бил доста скептичен, защото не е смятал, че това е интересно нещо, но как ли пък ще се отрази на науката. Няколко години по-късно той каза, че вече използва критериите за успеваемост в FameLab за работа със своите докторанти. От друга страна, един от първите феймлабъри, Росен Угринов, който всъщност беше победителя на първото издание в България, той дойде и каза, че всъщност голямата полза за него е именно това, че може да отиде при инвеститори и да поиска пари, знае как да говори на техния език, осъзнава, че има друг език за говорене. Пак от първия FameLab една чудесна история. Приятелката на един от нашите финалисти, която беше в залата, дойде при нас и каза: няма да повярвате, благодаря на този конкурс, защото най-сетне знае той с какво се занимава през деня. И редица такива примери. Един от много пресните примери е един участник в FameLab, който 3 пъти участва. Днес той е един от най-добрите презентатори, които имаме в България. И за сега той следва своята докторантура извън България. Той беше студент в Софийския университет. Той изпрати един фантастичен текст, в който се самопровъзгласи като пристрастен към лабораторията. Като каза, че не само, че приятелите са му се увеличили, не само, че той самият разбира повече защо трябва да се говори, но и когато е отишъл в университета си в Швеция, от него е поискано да направи едно такова представяне на областта, в която той работи, на което той нямаше да бъде способен, ако не беше минал през този конкурс.
Gentlemen, welcome to the FameLab International Final 2012. Please put your hands together for Quentin Cooper.
Back in March, Andrew Steele became our newest leader in FameLab UK when he won the UK final at the Royal Institution. He's just completed a doctorate at Oxford where he's been studying subatomic particles. That didn't stop him in the UK final talking about the links between quantum mechanics and the colour of carrots. Or in Wednesday's semi-final, detailing how to blow a first date at the cinema by explaining how the 3D glasses work. So, the next 3 minutes we could be out across the cosmos, down inside the atom, at the cinema, or off to the greengrocers. All that's certain is we'll be escorted there by the multi-dimensional Andrew Steele.
You're off out on a first date to the cinema. You've got hot tickets to the premiere of the critically acclaimed new release, Aliens vs. Giant Dinosaur Bees in Space 5, in 3D. But how to fill the awkward conversational vacuum before the film begins? What better way than to explain to your beloved-to-be how 3D glasses work? Things look 3D out here in the real world because you have 2 eyes. Hold your finger up in front of you, like this. Then close your left eye and look at it with just your right. And then swap eyes. Can you see that as you swap back and forth, your nearby finger seems to move against the faraway background? Judging the difference between the image seen by each eye is one of the ways that your brain constructs a 3-dimensional model of the world around you. So, if you want to make a 3D movie, all you have to do is film every scene with 2 identical cameras, about the same distance apart as human eyes. But when you're playing it back, how can you make sure that the right image gets to the right eye? We're going to need a property of light. Like jam, light comes in different flavours, but unlike jam, there are only two. These flavours are called polarisations, and they arise because light is a wave. If I shone a beam of light at you guys now, it could either wobble from side to side, that's horizontally polarised, or up and down, that's vertically polarised, as it travelled forwards. Most light is a mishmash of the two, but we can use a polarising filter to select just one flavour of light at a time. You could even make a pair of 3D glasses, which use horizontally polarised light for the left eye and vertically polarised for the right. And then you could play the film back on a corresponding pair of projectors. Sadly, there's a problem with this, and the problem arises if you tilt your head. Imagine you're leaning on your date's shoulder, and they're a bizarrely long way away. Maybe this date isn't going so well. So your head is at 90 degrees. You'll get the left eye's image through the right eye, and the right eye's image through the left, which will make you feel sick, and you'll probably vomit all over their lap. And you don't need a scientist to tell you that that is a cinema date disaster. The solution is to use circularly polarised light, a clever mixture of horizontally and vertically polarised. Circularly polarised light spirals through space instead of wobbling, and we could use it to make a different pair of 3D glasses, one which used light spiralling clockwise in the left eye and anti-clockwise in the right eye. And this comes with a big advantage. Clockwise and anti-clockwise don't change as you tilt your head, so the correct information is always delivered to each eye. So, no vomiting, and the perfect icebreaker. That's how science could save your date at the cinema.
And Marcus, the other thing you can do about 3D films is don't go. We've already had a Canadian representing Switzerland. Now we have a Spaniard who won the Austrian finals of FameLab. Didac Carmona works at the University of Graz, researching ageing and cell death. He may live in Austria, he may be their FameLab champion, but he's making no attempt to pass himself off as Austrian. He says he prefers Catalonian-style tapas to the local poppy seed cake, sunshine to cold, and football to skiing. Big question, though, is whether our judges will prefer him to our other finalists. Didac Carmona.
Hi, good evening. I have very good news. Your cells are dying. They're committing suicide right now. Yeah. Actually, billions of cells will die until you go to bed, and these bad cells will then be removed by your immune system and replaced by fresh and new ones. So yes, our cells in our bodies, they incorporate a suicide program which they can switch on, and sometimes they must, because under certain circumstances, our bodies can profit from the death of single cells. But why? Well, in the course of our lives, our cells here are exposed to a whole series of different factors, like damaging factors, like chemicals or irradiation, that can change the genetic information, resulting in so-called mutations. So our sweet and happy, always cheerful cells begin to change into bad cells, like this one. These bad cells are recognized by our bodies as a threat for them, for the organism, and then the suicide program is switched on. So maybe you can imagine. In fact, the threat is eliminated, but sometimes under certain circumstances and due to particular disturbances in the cell, such a bad cell cannot activate the suicide program. So in that case, such a bad cell can continue growing and dividing without restriction, and that is the beginning of a tumor. Cancer. So it would be good if we could just take such a bad cell here and force it to kill itself again. And that is exactly what we try in our lab. We extract different substances from different natural products like coffee or wine or tea, and substances that can actually force these cancer cells to commit suicide again. So what I usually do in the lab is I just take a substance like this one, and I feed it to these cells. Of course, nicely wrapped, because you want the bad cell to take it up. But once it has taken it, then this substance can, for instance, activate an alternative suicide pathway, which you may imagine can indeed also eliminate the threat. So what we actually want and what we hope is to help with our research to develop new anti-cancer strategies. And by the way, during the last 3 minutes, around 50 million cells have taken their own lives in each of your organisms. So congratulations, and continue with those regulated suicide rates so that indeed death keeps you alive. Thank you.
Обичам да говоря на тази тема. Започнахме с 9 страни в Югоизточна Европа. Това беше през 2006 година. 2007 година беше първият конкурс извън Великобритания. Тогава участваха 9 страни от Югоизточна Европа. Днес тези страни са активно. Тази година имахме 19 страни на финал, на международен финал. Всъщност в тези 19 страни не влизат няколко страни, които просто през годините в момента си почиват. До сега около 22-3 страни са участвали и няма да преувеличавам, но през седмица получаваме от нови страни интерес за участие. Ако ви кажа, че получаваме заявки от международни телевизионни канали, които искат FameLab участници от всички страни по света да участват в техни проекти като водещи, това е реален кариерен прогрес на учени от целия свят. Ако ви кажа, че един от най-големите учени на Обединеното кралство, професор Робърт Уинстън, се обърна и почти със сълзи на очи си каза, ако ние преди 20 години, когато и аз като учен започнахме този процес в Великобритания на отваряне към публиките, можехме да си представим, че малко по-късно общността на международните млади учени, които се интересуват, ще бъде такава. Той беше наистина пред сълзи. Аз винаги съм ужасно емоционално развълнувана по време на финалите, защото те са демонстрация за това, че науката е един от най-добрите международни езици. Няма културни бариери, няма езикови бариери, когато учени излязат на сцена. На сцената излизат учени от много различни страни, някои от тях са в културен или дори политически конфликт помежду си. Това остава извън науката. Виждали сме, представете си, победителката от Либия преди 3 години. Либия е една от страните, които в момента не участва. Едва ли си представяте, че Либия може да има жена победител на конкурс за учени? Тя беше биоложка. Тя, заедно с колегата си от Египет, заедно поздравяваха израелката, която участваше също в конкурса. Знаем какви са проблемите. Когато международният финал беше спечелен от сърбинът една година, хърватският посланник в Великобритания, който се намираше в салона по това време, беше първият, който скочи да го поздрави. Знаем миналото на тези страни. Няма по-спояващо от науката. Това го каза чудесно един от сръбските ни учени. Той каза, че наука не се прави в изолация. Науката е глобална, защото тя не може да няма национална наука.
Just like in the semi-final, Didact is followed by Rami Kopp from Egypt. Rami is driven by electricity, not as in he needs to be plugged in, but as in from an early age he found himself fascinated not just by it, but by the physics that governs electricity, which is very handy because he's now studying to be an electrical engineer. So get ready to generate some applause and stand by, although you shouldn't really be on standby, that wastes a lot of power, to be illuminated, electrified, and who knows what, amp and volt else by current Egyptian FameLab champion, Rami Kopt.
Hello, tell me anything. Out of charge. Oh, in such a case, when I need to recharge my mobile, the only thing I can do is to move from here to the plug. And while I'm being judged, this will be bloody embarrassing. However, we can solve this with a wireless electricity, which means, how can I make a lamp glow with no wires? But let's first talk about how we generate electricity. Imagine this is an electric wire. This wire contains zillions of free charges. And if we could move these charges with high velocity, then we say we have electricity in the wire. So let's make a deal. To have electricity, we need a medium, which is the wire. And we need force to make charges move. And this is what we take from a plug. In case of wireless electricity, the medium is the air. And the force that can make charges move is the force of the magnetic field. But what is the magnetic field? From a scientific theory, if a current flew inside a wire, an imaginary circles will be generated around the wire. These circles are called the magnetic field. And as the alternating current grows up and down, the size of the circles become bigger and smaller. And if it cuts another isolated wire while it's being changed, it will attract the free charges like two magnets, and then we will have moving charges, and then we will have electricity. Simply, imagine these books like generating circles changing with high variable speed. And if we connected wire and these circles cut it, it will make charges move, and then we will have a glowing lamp. But for the force to be effective, we need to be so close. But we only consider something, that the force can be increased by increasing the speed by which the magnetic field changes. So we change the speed until we reach a specific speed at which the force will be maximum. And then we call this speed the speed of magnetic resonance status. And this is the key for wireless transfer of electricity along long distance. And actually, since 2009, a group of MIT students succeed to make a lamp glow from distance of 2 meters without any wires. And now we have many products in the field of wireless electricity, such as mobile rechargers. Long time ago, traveling through air was a magic. And now, making a lamp glow in my hands without any wires is also a magic. But this is the magic of science. Thank you.
Next we're going to go to our Croatian winner, Dubravka Strazica. She's following in the footsteps of her big sister Ivana, who was also a Croatian winner and International FameLab finalist 2 years ago. But whereas Ivana's on the biological medical side of things, Dubravka has gone down a different route and is studying chemistry in Zagreb, where in her spare time she likes to watch horror films. Now, perhaps she was put off biology and onto horror films by an incident when she was 1.5 years old. She apparently found a bit of chocolate cake dropped in the yard a couple of hours earlier. The fact that it was a couple of hours and there were ants all over it, well, you're 1.5, it doesn't really deter you. So she was found by her mum with ants crawling out of her mouth. How do I know this? Because her big sister told me. That's what they're for. Over the next 3 minutes, though, no insects, just insights coming out of the mouth of Dubravka Strazica.
When I was 15, I had a huge crush on a guy. The problem was that I was slightly chubby and he was the most popular guy in the school. And you know how teenage girls tend to do stupid things to impress guys. So I started to starve myself. The plan actually worked. One day he asked me out and even tried to kiss me. And just when I thought my dream is coming true, he suddenly pulled back with some sore face. I didn't know what happened. It was the end of my world. A few years later, I started studying chemistry and found out what the problem was. After my last meal, the level of sugars, glucose, in my blood was high, but just a few hours later, the level of glucose went down. When glucose supplies, which we all had, were almost ran out, my fat started to burn. But I didn't stop there. I bravely continued with my starving obsession, and after a few days of starving, my metabolism was completely disrupted. You see, all metabolic pathways are interrelated. If we eat too many sugars, they will easily transform through our metabolism into fat. If we eat too many sweets, we will become fat. Too bad it's not the other way, that we can eat fat and become sweeter. As I continued with my starving and fantasizing about my prince, I forced my body to metabolic adaptation. Even though I was not taking any more sugars, the glucose in my blood had to remain at a certain level. My body was desperately seeking for any possible source of glucose. The only thing that could fulfill this big demand were proteins. But protein degradation also means a loss of vital functions. And now, even though my brain and muscles just love to eat sugars, my body decides to switch to a completely new menu. Instead of using glucose as fuel, my body produces some very interesting molecules called ketone bodies. This new fuel derives from metabolism of fats, and one of these ketone bodies is acetone. You all know acetone's unpleasant smell from a nail polish remover or a paint thinner. At this point, I started to realize what had happened that awful day. After a long starvation period, our breath smells like acetone. So instead of charming my prince with my perfect figure, I knocked him down with my bad breath. So if you want to impress your prince or princess, please don't starve yourself. There are much easier ways to one's heart.